kind of start off, I'm sure every panelist is getting this question today. It kind of goes without saying, the last year plus has been extremely challenging on a personal level, a professional level. Kind of how have you guys, seen things change on your side, and how have you kind of shifted gears to make sure that you're still, effectively reaching your customers?
So many different ways that I could answer that question, but I think thematically, there have been two big headlines: speed and sentiment. And a year ago, I would have maybe said safety instead of sentiment, but that feels like a big shift coming out of last year. So for me, a lot of our media channels were able to rise to the occasion last year and solve real world problems. For example, taking the pressure off call centers. How do we reach people and give them the information that they need in this really difficult moment where people are scrambling for information? And we were able to turn to social, for example, to reach those people really quickly and get the information to the right hands. And so there was a renewed level of recognition with regard to the speed we can get to market, and we've become addicted to that. And so we're pulling that into this year. And so we're thinking, obviously, like everybody listening focuses on long range planning. What are our agility mechanisms that we enjoyed last year that should stick around in a non-crisis environment? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is, obviously we obsess about brand safety all day, every day. I like to say to my team, when you wake up in the morning, your job is to keep us safe, and then secondarily, whatever you were hired to do. Honestly, what came up last year was a lot of, is that enough? Are we going far enough? How do you take context into account? How do you take sentiment into account? So we're working really hard to write the rule book on that now, so that we can really show up in ways that are indicative of our customers' expectations.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know that we previously kind of chatted, and you had said that, there is this fine balance between how do you quickly adapt and get into market, but still do it thoughtfully and not rush to the point where you're putting out something that really affects, the brand and brand safety. So I think that's extremely important. And have you guys really, do you tend to be a little bit more cautious, or do you think that you did a great job at shifting and really getting quick messaging out last year?
I think we were, like many people, building the plane as we were flying it. But part of our DNA here is to be, conservative and thoughtful and intentional when it comes to mass messaging. And I think we had a utility response, like a very practical response, was needed last year. I mean, you're talking about people and their money, right? Let's be clear. And so we needed to be able to help people navigate new things in new ways. Like, for example, those that were heavily reliant on their branches now suddenly needed another, avenue to access their funds or move money around, whatever it might be. We get everything from investing questions to how do I do a deposit. And so getting a whole swath of our customer base into the digital realm, onto the app, etc., was a really interesting journey, and we learned heaps around that. But then also was a lot more going on than just monetary concerns last year. Obviously, there was a lot of a lot of catalyzing moments culturally, and that really gave us a great opportunity to kind of pull up as a cross-functional team and be really thoughtful and intentional about where we show up, when we show up, what we say when we show up. Because we do believe in the power of substance. Like, don't say something unless you can back it up. And we were really able to put that to the test last year.
Mhm. So kind of piggybacking off of that, was there one specific tactic or maybe trying new platforms or something that you saw was really beneficial, now that you kind of got the ability to test and learn over the last year?
Yeah, look, I think last year really shone a bright light on events and how to manage them, the future of them, etc. So we experienced a 180 from this emphasis on the in-person experience, catering to clients and stakeholders in a very personal way, with media or amplification as like a secondary consideration, to, oh crap, the only way to bring this to life is through media. So like all of our events became media events, and thrust my team and I really into the center of discussions and opportunities that we'd been on the periphery of before. And so we became streamers. And in becoming streamers, we obviously learned a lot. We learned a lot about the expectations of people when they're consuming content like this and how it varies by platform. We learned what to care about by way of diagnostic metrics, like not all metrics are created equal. And so, what should we care about, and does that differ by platform? How worried should we be about bounce rates? If someone came on, spent a little bit of time and left, what does that mean? How do we address that? And also, maybe even most importantly, it allowed us this unique opportunity to take our stuff to more people, take our experiences and cascade them further. And that's been the beauty of this whole sort of shift. And again, like the idea of speed and the addiction that we've generated there, Courtney, I think same goes for this. I think through this year and into next year, we will hold on to this idea of our content, our experiences, the great things that we do can and should go further. So what piece of that playbook should we hold on to as people come back together in the real world?
Personally really love, I've explored your social channel, and I'm a huge foodie and I love to cook. So I love that you've leaned into kind of these virtual culinary experiences and leaning into chefs and things like that. And I think that it's been such a great way to kind of, lean into what people were doing. We saw all of these people, turning to crafting and doing things at home kind of once the pandemic hit to stay busy. So I do really enjoy that you guys are kind of embracing that aspect of the pandemic. And I think, sometimes financial brands may find social a little challenging. So I'd love to kind of get your opinion on kind of what you think works well in the social space for financial brands, and kind of what you guys have learned, in kind of delving into different platforms.
Yeah, we've learned, and I think we could write a book on the things that we've learned, but you're right. We have used these past few months as an opportunity to experiment. There have been things that we've wanted to try and maybe perhaps shied away from, that we use this moment to do. And I think the starting point for what you just described was actual real business decisions. Like our card businesses should be oriented around what people now need versus what was popular pre-pandemic. So, shifting reward points toward grocery, and like heading down a different path, and being able to pivot to where people are and meeting their needs. And so that led to new partnership opportunities, new platform opportunities. And what we've learned is that, you will have heard the phrase content is king all the time, but actually one step further for us, authenticity is king. And so it's been really a journey about how do we bring our customer stories to the forefront and sit side by side with that in a really compelling, sticky way. You will see that play out, not just with the card business, but how we're thinking about the retail business, how we're thinking about small businesses, and trying to bring those authentic stories to the front. And social is obviously a great place to do that. And the celebrities and talent and influencers that we work with really help bring those to life as well, in a way that a paid media ad just can't.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned small businesses. Obviously, everyone is very aware that small businesses were particularly impacted last year. And you guys do, in addition to kind of, the culinary and the experiential aspect of social, do a great job at highlighting businesses, especially like female-owned businesses and person of color-owned businesses. Do you think that's going to continue to grow and expand as kind of an opportunity for you guys to really spotlight businesses for the next few years?
Absolutely. It's core to our Chase for Business strategy. And actually I would go so far as to say it's it's the beating heart of how we think about marketing and media at large outside of small businesses. You know, the idea that you should have your Hispanic plan over here and your other plan here, and just thinking about things in a bifurcated way. Like, we've worked to eradicate that. And so the game plan this year onward is to completely shift the headset, and surface the audiences we're trying to reach, work in an audience first manner, and then put the messages that they need in front of them in that authentic way that, like I mentioned. But as it relates to small businesses, yes, there's a lot of work to be done. They've been really hard hit, and we're looking to zoom in on very specific geos and where we can be most helpful. But outside of that, it's a combination of onboarding new partners that can help us reach these audiences in meaningful ways. Knowing, sometimes it's a level of self-awareness, and you have to know where your limits are. And we've recognized that, and we're working to onboard new partners like a triple lift, for example. And then it's about dropping scale off the table for a second. And if you're not obsessed with scale, and rather you're obsessed with quality, where does that mean how does that change how you show up? And then finally, that storytelling component, really letting examples of our small business partners, like the women of color that we have, that we work with, and the veteran owned businesses and so forth. Like, we have a great list of fantastic businesses that we've been putting at the forefront of our commercials. So that's like sort of putting our money where our mouth is. And that's been the trifecta that we've been running for small business. But as I said, it goes far beyond the small business game plan, and it's just a more holistic problem to solve, really.
I like that you talked about, in the last two things we kind of discussed, leaning audience first. I think a lot of times people from social just want as much reach as possible, and they don't really think about the quality of audiences that they're really trying to go after. And then that authenticity of storytelling. I think that, we've seen the increase in uses of influencers across brands, and I don't know that people necessarily have kind of realized how, influencers take, their own brand very, intelligently, and want that authenticity, and then how, effectual that can be on the back end, especially for, very large established brands like Chase. So it's really great to see that you guys are kind of using a lot of these different important like social tactics to really, tap into what you're doing.
Yeah, there's a whole machine here behind the way we think about influencers and who we work with, and how we sustain those relationships, and how we keep certain aspects of what we're doing fresh. It's a risk reward discussion. It really does have to feel authentic to both parties, because that's the only way it would really resonate with our customers, and we've seen that in our research. And so that really drives our roster of who we work with, and the periods of time that we work with them for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So another thing, obviously, you guys have a number of segments of business, from credit card to checking to sports sponsorships and things like that. How do you guys divide and conquer? Do you kind of spread efforts across all of the segments? Are there times where one segment is more important than the other?
This is another great example of some evolutionary steps that we've taken. We are trying to move from, just caring for the campaign to caring for the firm, and what does that, and you're not trading one off for the other, but bringing balance. And so we are looking at our audiences and building cohorts, and then, what of our portfolio of products should be sequenced against this audience? How do we measure for efficacy of that sequence? How do we think about how home lending in market with retail is a 1-2 punch that yields more than if they were working individually in the market, etc. So we have a learning agenda associated with this portfolio approach that is really putting audiences at the center. I'll give you a great example. The Sapphire credit card is obviously a jewel in the crown here, and it's very, very important to us, given how much we know about that customer base and what they need. We have to be very protective that we're not oversaturating an audience like that. So we've had to put in a level of discipline at the macro strategic end and at the micro campaign deployment end to make sure that we're not oversaturating key audiences. And I think that that's really, really important in this world where brands are like a battering ram in the lives of people, right? Think about how many paid or organic things you rub up against in a given day. We have to take all of that into account given how big our portfolio is. Like without this level of sensible marketing frameworks, I think, we would be in danger of putting hundreds of messages across the same 10 groups, which, is bad for business.
Yeah. No, I agree that, that audience recognition and really segmenting everything that you do out and, not cannibalizing the same audience. I think it's funny for people that aren't in the weeds, they may not be as aware of how many steps there are from the financial space to make sure that you're segmenting audiences and lines of business and taking legal into consideration and all of these different things that go into just creating social posts. So it's very interesting, all of the, the pieces, the puzzle pieces that need to come together to get effectual marketing out.
Yeah, and I would add one little point there, Courtney. The way we are operationally structured allows us to sort of put teeth into that concept. So we don't have all of our lines of business stakeholders directly engaging with the marketplace, but rather we have a center of excellence. If you can think about it like an hourglass, right? That we're able to pipe all of the needs and ambitions and business outcome requirements into one place, and then that can be farmed out in a more effective way. And then, so the flow of information works like this. And I think without that construct, we will be in danger of having, a vision for how we would show up in the marketplace, but a different reality, if that makes sense. So those of you out there who don't have a center of excellence, maybe you might want to consider it. It's a good approach.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mentioned center of excellence. So we're seeing more and more of our partners from our side really shift towards that strategy, especially if you do have a number of audiences or a number of pieces of business that, establishing consistent benchmarking, establishing, best practices and kind of housing all of this in one place. Streamlining communication has become extremely necessary to get, things done, because it becomes this horrible game of telephone where you're, trying to figure out how this strategy. So we are seeing, and that seems the way that the space is trending from social to kind of establish that. Have you found that it has really helped streamline things?
I missed the first part of the question, Courtney.
Oh yeah. Do you feel that the Center of Excellence has really streamlined the way that you guys are handling social?
100%. And I think as a heavily regulated marketer, it has helped us govern the way we behave and the way we think and the way we engage with our partners. It has helped us with our record retention, all of the stuff that you need in order to be exam ready. And by the way, I don't think you need to be in a regulated space to behave as though you were. I think as it relates to social and influencers, it behooves marketers to really think about setting the bar as high as possible and governing to that bar. But yes, having the center has definitely enabled us to drive some standardization, to bring intentionality to the when, not only the where. That's very, very important. And then to your point, being able to circle back with the broader marketing community and say, hey, this is what's working. We're seeing green shoots over here. Who wants to be my partner to go chase that one down and see if we can do more there. This isn't working. And here's what we think that means for us. And so I think without that careful orchestration, with a centralized purview, that kind of accomplishment is really, really hard. Then you're just asking a bunch of nice people to talk to one another frequently, which is, hard.
So kind of jumping back to what you were mentioning at the beginning, obviously, there was a huge concern with finances and people's money and kind of, what does this pandemic mean for everyone with, job instability and things like that. Did you guys kind of see a call in the marketplace for, giving financial tips or advice, or kind of how did you guys approach kind of this sentiment kind of at the beginning?
Absolutely. Yes, we were seeing all shades of need in that regard, from very, very basic to obviously the more sophisticated. Um, there were a lot of common ground as it relates to digital enablement and empowering people to transact and interact digitally, and having customer journeys or informational journeys associated with that. So what I mean there, Courtney, is, if somebody's searching for financial advice, or how to manage their credit, all of that kind of thing, it was a case of connecting what we were learning through big gateways like paid search, like social, and piping that into the types of information and how we package that information for people, and then where we disseminated it. It's not enough to write long form articles or create a video or build a hub and then just expect people to come to you to ingest it. We had to find all of the wonderful ways to slice and dice and disseminate. So we had everything from seminars to social posts to YouTube stuff. And so we definitely had a bit of trial and error initially to see like what's working, what's not. But honestly, the playbook is as simple as properly listening to what the data is telling you that people really need, as opposed to inventing that in a Zoom room and deciding for people what it is that they need. So piping in the right data at the starting point is always wise. Then building content off the back of that, and then serving that content that in a way that is platform friendly. So putting the right type of content fit for purpose on a platform where people are spending their time, and then ensuring the customer journey from there is as clean and crisp and easy and one click, two click to get to the thing that they need, as opposed to a cumbersome go to log in. Getting in people's way is the fastest way to turn off certainly a prospective client, let alone somebody who's used to working with you. So we've also, I would say one more thing on that. We've bubbled up financial health as just its own really, really important initiative. So rather than have it buried in the roadmap of each of our lines of businesses and what they hope to achieve for their individual customers, it's just become this bigger thing in its own right. And how do we think about it? How do we talk about it? How do we take it from a screen to a community, or from community to screen? And so that's the work really to be done this year, is really pushing that forward.
I really like that you mentioned kind of balancing all of these different channels with kind of the ease of access, because I think, even we in our own, daily social usage, if you have to take, 2 or 3 steps to get to what you need, you tend to
Nightmare.
just, yeah, it's sad, but you tend to just kind of give up and move on.
Yeah.
So I really like that you're taking the consumer journey into account for that as well.
And we're not perfect. We certainly have areas of improvement there, but the most important thing I think is, in a go forward fashion, is we're thinking about what are we doing second half of this year? How are we thinking about next year? By ruthlessly putting the UX at the center of those conversations and building those off real, what is the consumer really telling us they need? So listening to real data, those two things as the beating heart of your planning is a really compelling and certainly energizing starting point, and could help eliminate some of those pitfalls that we tried to fix along the way.
I see we're getting a number of questions. So kind of before we dive into those, the last thing that we usually kind of end with is there anything that you're looking forward to from both a professional standpoint and kind of a personal standpoint over the rest of kind of 2021?
Personally, I am looking forward to a haircut, flying home to see my family, feeling good about swimming pools. So those are three things that spring to mind personally. On a professional level, I echo and underscore everything that Casey said in the webinar beforehand, and bringing the family back together and seeing people in the flesh would be really, really exciting. But I would add one kind of version of that's top of mind for me. We've been having a lot of virtual Zoom sites. And honestly, the Zoom gloom is a real thing. And it's sometimes really hard to get the what would have been whiteboard juices flowing over Zoom. So I personally am really excited about having an in-person jam session with my leadership team, to inject some of that creativity back into our thinking that is just really hard to extract from the little box on the screen.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was one of those people that used to walk over to other people's desks and ask questions before, and slacking, and texting is not quite the same. So it will be nice at some point to really get back into that kind of brainstorm team dynamic, and hopefully it's sooner than later. But
yes,
so we have a number of questions that I'm going to dive into. So the first one we've gotten is, how are you tracking the success of your partnerships or influencer efforts on a performance basis?
How are we tracking? So I think I'd mentioned that diagnostic metrics differ by initiative, by audience, but our starting point is a learning agenda and being really intentional about the things we seek to learn. And from there, we build a cadence that makes sense for the initiative or for the campaign. But we have freed ourselves from a one size fits all metric, right? And we're really trying to be purposeful in what is the North Star for each campaign, and making sure that we have our eye on that. Is that defining where you want the needle to move, and then what are the diagnostic things to keep an eye on in order to make sure that that's actually happening. So that's, I don't know if we're really answering the question, but certainly we have a way of examining returns on the back of media. Okay, so obviously we think about the efficacy of a dollar spent, and that's really hard though when you get into the world of influencer, because it's not really about the immediate ROI, because as you know, you have to factor for longer periods of time potentially. You have to factor for weird and wonderful routes to the product or service that you're actually promoting. And so we're at the cusp of figuring out how we weave that into the way we model, because obviously it's hard to convince a CFO to bet on something unless you can in fact point to the outcome. But Casey said it earlier, there's an art and a science to this stuff, right? So we also carefully care for our brand health metrics. So the way I would summarize the answer to that question is to say that there's the media diagnostics that differ depending on what the North Star needle that you're trying to move. And then we also look at the softer stuff. And it's a marriage of those two things. And so, and we build our cadence around that. So if we're going to look at this stuff every week, and then we're going to pull up on this in a few months and see how these things triangulate, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that there are so many kind of metrics to measure on the back end from influencer perspective. From the media side, obviously, tracking KPIs and specific social metrics, and then kind of this long tail brand recognition sentiment aspect that comes out of influence.
Yeah, the long tail often gets lost in the conversation, but it's actually very, very important. And honestly, if you didn't care about that stuff, then you would wonder if influencer is the right path for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So another really great question. How do you determine where you're spending time on emerging technologies?
Um, so obviously, as I said, we're risk averse when it comes to exploring platforms that we don't feel good in terms of meeting certain brand safety thresholds or regulatory thresholds. So you wouldn't see us often jumping 2 feet first into new things necessarily. We definitely monitor and make sure that we know where the opportunities lie and have a really good sense of when something might make sense for us. But I tend to think about technology opportunities a little differently. Obviously, we have our IDFA, iOS, cookieless burning platform. And so technology for us at the moment is really about enabling data independence and how we are going to work with the publishers in the future in a way that's safe and effective. So that's the turning of the page that we're doing as it relates to technology.
It's interesting because I think, on the marketer side, you want to kind of test and learn, but obviously, making sure that with a brand as large as Chase, that you're doing it and taking into consideration brand things. So it seems like you really want to do maybe small, very slower testing and kind of test and learn
Yeah,
as it comes up.
we're very methodical in that regard, and we have a great test and learn playbook that helps everybody feel comfortable with the journey. What I will say though is every now and again there's an exception to the rule, and so last year we dipped our toe in TikTok in service of students. So you might have seen our show me your walk campaign, and that felt like a bold move for us. It worked gangbusters. It was very, very successful, and so it had us sort of think about the role of various platforms. If it's not product specific, is there a role? What might that role be? And so from an engagement standpoint, as it relates to experiments like the one I mentioned on TikTok, there's going to, I think, be more of that in our future.
Great. So the next question is, how do you go about identifying talent and determining that they're the right fit for the brand?
That's an excellent question. There's a whole machine associated with that, a cross-functional effort. It takes a village. But obviously, we need to start with what is it that we're trying to achieve and whom is it that we're trying to reach? What are their needs? And then obviously, Chase the brand, JP Morgan the brand, JP Morgan Chase and Co. the brand. We have a really clear line of sight on brand tone and what we stand for and how we need to show up in the world. And so triangulating that with humans isn't the easiest process. So it's really deep and rigorous and takes a long time, and deliberately so. Because typically when you come out the other side of that process, you end up with a relationship that lasts quite a long time. And that's certainly our preference rather than the fickle nature that is, systemic in the influencer space. But that's not to say we don't value that. It's just we have to be very, very thoughtful and careful. Like I said to you earlier, risk reward. So the Kevin Hart relationship is a great example of a marriage that works. Like what he stands for and the things that he cares about are so in sync with a lot of what we are trying to accomplish and the people that we're trying to accomplish that with. And so I think that that's a really good example of running through the criteria and coming out with a great answer that works for so many of our customers.
So if we take the Kevin Hart example, this question is asking, do you select talent first and then kind of craft messaging, or do you kind of craft the idea and then try to find talent that fits into kind of, the messaging?
I don't know that we have a single way of thinking about that, honestly. It may differ by brand or buy initiative, because it all depends on what sparked you in the first place. It might be that we're doing this campaign, and wouldn't it be great if we were able to have somebody else tell this story for us? And that could be the impetus for an influencer talent discussion. Or it could be, actually, we really admire this person. They have the same audience that we aspire to reach. And so let's work something around that person and their audience. And so there isn't a straight answer to that question. I think that we come at it from a multitude of angles, depending.
One of the last questions, how have you shifted your data strategy over the past few months?
Oh my God. A lot. Is that a fair answer? So I think the word or the phrase that I associate with that question for 2021, the t-shirt for 2021 is desperately seeking data portability. That's the t-shirt I want to wear. And so, look, we're obviously a large, complex organization, rich in data. And so finding all of it, getting access to it, being able to divert the right parts of it to different places is incredibly complicated. I enjoy the fact, though, that I'm not alone in my anxiety on this one, and that we're all in it together. I liken it to a puzzle that comes together differently for everyone. And so to put a fine point on it, there's a lot of brilliant brains thinking about what is the best way that this puzzle should come together for JP Morgan Chase. But it's an embarrassment of riches, I would say, that we don't have the same problem as others desperately seeking data, whereas we have plenty of it. It's just a case of now, how do we use it, and how do we emerge from all of this this transient period that we're in, feeling really good about our data independence.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, you had mentioned, how do you justify, this, and, we use data. And I think that the social space has grown to a point where data is so important. And it sounds like having, that on your side has definitely been helpful, but it's also been, a huge development over the past, 6 months or so, and kind of how that changes. So very interesting.
Yeah. And, we relish the partnerships that we have. Agency partners, our platform partners, it really does take a village, and we push for transparency of dialogue and continuity of dialogue around this stuff, and really trying to drink in as much as we can. I think from a social standpoint, there's no denying that bespoke solutions for a lot of our partners will be required, and we just have to work through it together.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Chris. Are you coming?
This is the curtain call.
Indeed, that's my face, is the face of Influential's curtain call. Well, thank you so much, Tracy-Ann. Really appreciate you being on today. We don't often get chief media officers, so I was really excited to see that happen, and it's a great different perspective to hear from you. One thing I've been pretty much asking everyone today, and hopefully you can join us in the future, we are getting very active on Clubhouse, and we'd love to have you. Are you currently on Clubhouse?
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm a taker of the internet versus a giver to the internet, but I'd be happy to participate.
Hopefully we can dip your toe in and get you a little bit interested in it. We're going to try to make it a little bit more roundtable style. I think we're going to add, 3 or 4 C-level executives and make it sort of popcorn, mastermind, fun sort of stuff. So